It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Oh, broadcasting today back in the Lethbridge, Alberta studios. It is great to be home. Late flight home from Toronto last night. We were stuck on the tarmac for an hour trying to leave around supper time out of Toronto. And it rained it was like being underneath a waterfall. It was raining so hard. Amazing, crazy. And been a hot week in Ontario for sure. Been a cold week in Western Canada. At some point, we shall meet in the middle. It's going to warm up in Western Canada. It looks like next week's a lot better. So maybe we're past some of the snowfalls we saw. I don't know if you saw some of the pictures, but west of Nanton, Alberta, up against the foothills. I don't know if it was a foot of snow, but it was pretty darn close based on some of the pictures that I saw. Well, hey, today we got a RealAg Issues Panel. We'll also have a beef market update with Anne Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange. So today on the Issues Panel, Tyler McCann, Managing Director at CAPI. We'll also be joined by Kelvin Heppner and Lyndsey Smith of RealAgriculture. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can always send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms. You're also more than welcome to call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Make sure that you check out all the great podcasts that Real Agriculture has to offer. You can go to realagriculture.com/podcast to get a whole list of some of the great ones that we do have for offer. You can also pick up all of our podcasts wherever you get your podcasts. You get Apple Podcast, Spotify. There's so many platforms, too many to name, but things like Mind Your Farm Business, The Agronomist, The Successors, Ruminating with RealAg. There is a ton of stuff for you to pick up and listen to keep yourself up to date on all things that are happening in agriculture. Also RealAg Radio as well. If you search Real Agriculture's podcasts on any of those platforms, there's actually like a what I call like the fire hose, where it's all of the stuff that we do audio-wise in one feed. You will not miss anything that Real Agriculture produces on a daily basis. So that's also an option as well. Okay, let's take a break, and we're going to dig in on the biggest issues of the week. But first, we're going to get an update on what exactly is happening in these cattle markets with Anne Wasko right after this.
Choose Viatude fungicide and unleash best-in-class sclerotinia protection in canola and premium protection against white mold in soybeans. Viatude contains a powerful premix of Onmira Active and Prothioconazole. This unique combo delivers high-performance disease control, crop safety, mix compatibility, resistance management, and advanced mobility for excellent coverage and superior plant protection. Choose Viatude fungicide for stronger, more vigorous crops.
I get to spend every day talking to farmers in the ag industry through RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio. But nothing is more fun than speaking to an audience live and in person. If you're planning an ag event, book a Real Agriculture speaker to make it a successful and memorable experience. Email shaney@realagriculture.com and you can book myself or any other RealAg personality to speak at your event. Bring your audience all the fun, insight, and energy of Real Agriculture.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh! You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch Wheat Pete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify. Okay, it's time to talk about what's going on in these cattle markets. We'll do a beef market update with Anne Wasko with Gateway Livestock Exchange. Anne, how are you doing?
I am great, Shaun. How are you today?
Good. You came into the house. You feel like you're maybe on like Jurassic Park as they're walking through the plains and they have to separate the grass.
What a good problem. What a good problem.
It's great to see.
It is. It
Like,
is. It rained again this morning. Nothing big, but it just it seems like we're in that little that system that we keep getting little squirts of rain here and there.
I looked at this week's Saskatchewan crop report, and they were talking about percentage of pasture in abundance of moisture. When's the last time you heard that?
It's been a long time. It's been a long time. It's great conditions.
They'll take it. The heat's going to come up next week, and we're really going to see. So we'll get to the cattle markets. What's going on with the cash prices this week?
Well, in the U.S., Shaun, it was one of those weeks where, of course, we had the holiday at midweek. It didn't affect kill or anything like that, but it did mean futures were closed. And so it's been one of those weeks where it's been testing the waters. Because we're coming off of last week of a new high, cash high. The 5-area average, just for listeners, 192.55 last week. So, of course, this week, Packers are kind of trying to, let's dial this little back a little bit. Whereas cattle feeders are saying, well, no, we're on a roll. Let's carry on. So there hasn't been a pile of trade. I think we'll see it today. But at the time that we're talking, certainly Texas maybe looked a few sales a little better, and the northern regions may be steady. But we'll see what happens. But we're in that kind of a push me, pull me kind of market. The cutout last night closed up just shy of 323 on the choice cutout. That's up $4.50 from last week. The smaller kills lately have really been helping to kind of keep that prop since Memorial Day. Even at that big money, 323 cutout, Packers he's either side of break even, probably more on the red. So that's why he's trying to control the buy this week. This afternoon, we've got a U.S. cattle and feed report, and the expectations for this June 1 report would say, like last month, on-feed numbers just down a wee bit, down 1% is the guesses. May placements down 2%. Marketing's unchanged. So that's what's going into the report. That's what the futures have got dialed in. It's probably a fairly friendly guesstimate if we come off like that in terms of keeping those on-feed numbers down. So that's kind of how we start Friday off in terms of the U.S. Bringing it back to the local market, we did lose some money here in Alberta this week. 432 to 434 delivered dressed was the bids that Canfax was reporting last night. That's kind of 1 to 6 lower dressed. So again, last week's Canfax average was just shy of 264, 263.75 to be exact. I do think this week's average will probably be back into that 260, 261 area. Still phenomenal prices, but probably dialing it back a little bit. It looks to me, Shaun, like Packers have, in Western Canada here anyways, have been able to get a few more cattle around them. We knew the third quarter has more cattle placed against it. So they've got a little more in terms of inventory around them. They're stretching the lift times a little bit. And that we talk about leverage or that bargaining power. It's shifting, it's been strongly in the producer's hands for the second quarter. It feels to me like it's shifting a wee bit back to the packer.
Yeah, and the seasonality is working against the producer here a little bit too.
Absolutely. We get into bigger supplies. That's a typical normal summer market. And that's why typically the markets dial back a little bit. And as well, we've got those big demand weekends behind us, that started with our Victoria Day and the Memorial Day and Father's Day and all the rest of it. So those big demand grilling weekends are now behind us, and we get into, as we referred, the dog days of summers, where it's more like hot dogs and hamburgers. So we'll see how things go. But having said that, demand's been really good. I don't want to rain on that parade at all. We'll talk about that some more in a minute.
Yeah. What about out in Ontario? What's been happening price-wise there?
This week, Shaun, this week's been super quiet in terms of trade. Canfax didn't even have anything to report in terms of trade yet. So I would call the Ontario market quiet.
Strike related, no doubt.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just before we leave the Alberta thing, we've got the U.S. on feed report this afternoon. The Canadian report for Western Canada was last week, and same kind of theme. This is the CanFax report. On feed numbers on June 1 were actually down 3% versus last year. So we see that gap versus last year here in Western Canada starting to even widen out a little bit more in terms of smaller placements. Yes, cattle are heavier than last year, and that's been a big topic for especially the first half. We do see numbers certainly getting smaller in the second half of 2024, and the same story I think will reign true in the U.S.
StatsCan has some data out on trade. How are we making out year to date, whether it's exports or even look at some of the imports?
Yeah, we'll look at both because they both really tell a story and they really play into supply at the end of the day. The export numbers, and you probably recall me at the end of 2023 talking about, we're going to see smaller production, expect smaller exports. Well, the Canadian export numbers just continue to be solid and surprise me, certainly to the upside, which is a good news because a Japanese consumer is just as important in my books as a Canadian consumer. And so demand has been good, and I think exports, strong exports have been part of it. So this is April dated. I know it's a wee bit dated, but up 4% in April for our total exports to all countries. Year to date, we're now up 7% in volume. If you're just counting money, we're up 8%. So these factors are all really solid in terms of that demand piece. Japan was a solid. I know Japan's still struggling on the economic front, but they were solid for Canadian beef, up 23% in April. Year to date, we're up 12% into Japan. The U.S., we were up 6% in April, so that leaves year to date to the U.S. up 10%. And the other of the top three would be Mexico, and we were up 20% in our exports to Mexico in April. Year to date, we're up 4%. So it was a good month. If we can maintain that kind of pace, Shaun, through 24 and keep surprising me, that's a huge part in Canadian beef demand. So it's not just watching what's going on at the restaurant down the road in Lethbridge or in Toronto or what's going on at the counter in Calgary. We have to look at demand export wise as well. Flip side, imports, we've got some of the strongest record lean trim prices. So that's cow beef, if you want to put it another way. Both the U.S. and Canada, record prices. Guess what happens when you have record prices? You tend to be quite attractive for imports. And that's exactly what this is May data that we saw. We were up 12% for beef imports into Canada in the month of May. So year to date, we're up 14%. Remember, two very different products. What's coming in tends to be the hamburger style beef. What we tend to be exporting is high quality middle meats. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but of course, as you would expect, the culprits, maybe that's not the right word to use, for imports were Australia, New Zealand, and Mexico. So those were the three big jumps in imports, and the same story into the U.S. as well.
That's good. A lot of times when we talk about trade, we're talking about the U.S., right? And so a lot of times we don't hear about Mexico. So our exports to Mexico up significantly, but also we're buying a lot of Mexican product as well. That's that USMCA Kuzma deal working in our favor.
Well, and it's a classic reminder to all of us that let this product flow to the highest market, wherever it might be, cattle or beef. It could be here, and of course, North America has record prices, and I know you talked to Lance Zimmerman from Rabobank about what's going on in North America, and we've got the highest prices in terms of jumps over last year in the world. So good news on that front.
Well, Anne, thanks so much for joining us here this week for the Beef Market Update. Super busy kind of times on the ranch, and like I said, you're just trying to push away all that grass. So
it's a good problem. It's a good problem.
It is very much so. Have yourself a great weekend.
You too, Shaun. Thank you.
We'll be right back on RealAg Radio with the RealAg Issues Panel. Tyler McCann of CAPI, Kelvin Heppner, and Lyndsey Smith of RealAgriculture standing by. We'll be right back right after this.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today. Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola. It's summertime, and you've got a lot of important decisions to make when it comes to your corn crop. Let the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com help guide you through those big decisions with input from leading experts in the field. If it's spray timing, disease identification, or any other field issue, the Corn School's got you covered. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Friday. It's time for the RealAg Issues Panel. Let's bring in the gang up first. It is a Lyndsey Smith coming out of the nation's capital, which is hot. Hot, hot, hot. Well, getting better anyway.
Yes, we are only going up to like a 27, 28 today, which is a reprieve from the incredibly humid. You can be jealous all you want, Shaun. I have hid in my house as much as I could all week.
What are you complaining about? I was in Toronto yesterday. It was hot. I was like, yes, this is awesome. Finally some heat.
I am well adapted to northern climates, okay? Anything over 25 is a waste unless you're at the beach. No, but we had 33, 34, 35 degrees plus the humidex for about 4 days. And certainly it has moved east now, so the East Coast is dealing with it. It's hard on animals, I'll tell you that much.
Very. And hard on people.
Yes. And hard on people, yeah, but hard on the livestock, and definitely had a few storms roll through as well. So we definitely have some increased wet conditions where we did not need them. And we've got a torrential downpour slated for the weekend. So I got to tell you, the beans and the corn, in some instances, do not look very happy. There's a lot of standing water, a lot of yellow corn.
Yeah.
It's wet.
Yeah, on the Farmer Rapid Fire yesterday, Jack Fraser from Manitoba he's from Winkler, and he was talking about the edible beans really looking kind of maybe the worst of all the crops with some of the moisture and the wet feet that they have. Also joining us, Kelvin Heppner, speaking of Manitoba, pretty much the unofficial premier of the province. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I think that's a far cry, but yeah, we are wet here and it's been cool. And so the edible beans and soybeans are very short. And of course, yesterday was the longest day of the year. So we're kind of setting that lowest pod height now. And I think it's probably time to start thinking about how we're going to scrape the ground at harvest to get these beans off the ground. Hopefully we get some more heat for those crops. Wheat and canola, though, although drowned out in a couple spots in fields, I drove around much of south central Manitoba yesterday, and there's water sitting in fields almost everywhere. But the wheat and canola where they're not in water, look pretty strong right now. They've appreciated the cooler temperatures that we've had.
If you look at sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. If you look at the Saskatchewan crop report, you look at the oil seeds. This is as of June 17th. 41% of the oil seeds are behind, right? Which makes sense because we haven't had the heat. Whereas you got forage only 16%, spring cereals only 29% behind. So yeah, it's those oil seeds that are definitely kind of taken to the chin and the least ahead. For sure, only 4% of oil seeds ahead. So we need some heat on the prairies, and it looks like it's going to get a little bit better starting here on the weekend into next week. More of Lyndsey's kind of temperature around that 23, 25 Celsius. It's more comfortable, and the wheat thrives at those temperatures as well. Also joining us is Tyler McCann. He is Managing Director of the Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute, better known as CAPI. Joining us from where exactly are you today?
Bristol, Quebec, Shaun, just outside of Ottawa, and I think it's pretty interesting timing that the House rises for the summer and the heat wave passes. So I don't know if all of that hot air finally left the nation's capital at the same time, but it's it's a summer starting in Ottawa.
Yeah, so Parliament, everyone's gone home, and it's barbecue season. Stampede is around the corner in Calgary, so we're going to have all the politicians show up in their howdy doody costumes and say, I can flip a pancake too. Tyler, as you look at, as Parliament leaves the city of Ottawa, what unfinished business was left on the table in your mind?
It's a pretty long list, and unfortunately that list's been the same for a really long time. I mean, we have the really important pieces of legislation that are effectively stuck and not going anywhere, including the carbon tax exemption for farmers. But really, we are in this world where agriculture files just don't seem to move forward. And I think if you look at what's government's accomplished since last September, pretty short list when it comes to agriculture and food.
Kelvin, you're nodding. What comes to mind for you?
Yeah, there's a bunch of private members' bills that are related to agriculture that have advanced into this, as far as into the Senate, and well, in the case of C-234, as Tyler just mentioned, it actually went through the Senate and back to the House of Commons, and it's stalled where it is now. So yeah, that is the case. There are also some other pieces that people might be okay with not having passed before the summer break, including the capital gains legislation, the change to the capital gains inclusion rate. So that's something that I think, like you said, Shaun, politicians going to their parades and barbecues this summer on that circuit are going to be hearing from people this summer about the capital gains exemption changes and the impact that people are expecting that will have on their businesses, or that are already having with that deadline, June 25th, where it takes effect, just a couple days away now.
Yeah, I think they're going to hear loud and clear from the business community. Because there's one thing to hear from lobby groups and, special interest groups and industry groups. It's another thing when you are belly to belly at that pancake breakfast and having to hear from, in some cases, some of these ridings where you know a lot of the people personally, they're going to hear about the capital gains. Like
you got the small business float right in front of you and behind you in the parade every weekend, and those owners are reminding you, hey, this is impacting me.
Yeah, exactly. And Lyndsey, another big political thing that's happening, I believe it's on Monday. We got a by-election in downtown Toronto, and some people believe that this could be the straw that broke the camel's back. In the last election, Liberals won 25 of 25 ridings in the downtown of Toronto. If the Conservatives are to win this riding, which involves some of the downtown, that could be the end. Do you think if the Conservatives win that seat, that could be the end for Trudeau?
So they're calling this sort of a proxy vote on, JT's leadership, let's call it. And so if this by-election results in a Conservative MP being sent to Ottawa, that essentially confirms what we've all been saying for months, that Justin Trudeau is done, and that he should be stepping down as leader. We also, now, is that true? I don't know. I feel like there's been plenty of other things that might be pointing at the fact that JT is done. Can I call him that? Probably shouldn't. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
It hasn't been a good week for Justin Timberlake either, so maybe...
Yeah, that's true. That's right. There's a lot of memes about that one. Anyway, get your stuff together there, Justin. Anyway, so, is this really that impactful? I think that it certainly holds weight. It does show, from the voters' perspective, what they want to do and what they may continue to do in the next election. But we also saw numbers this week, of course, that calling for Justin to step down as leader. So not just that, the Liberal Party in general is losing, but we saw numbers that really showed that if Trudeau is not the leader, that probably bears some good news for the Liberal Party. And the polls are showing that. And yet, I don't think he steps down. I think he goes right through to this next election, and he's going to be absolutely defeated in every way, shape, or form. But I completely don't think that he will step down at all.
I shared some data with... Oh, go ahead, Kelvin. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I wonder if there's a little bit of liberal spin happening around this election, and saying if they pull this off, like that, raising the prospects of this being a Conservative win. I think the Liberals actually, this is a stronghold for them, and it'd be a huge upset if the Conservatives win. It wouldn't just be I wonder if there's some expectations setting that's happening ahead of time here, so that it looks good when the Liberals do, looks better for them when they do win.
I heard one political pundit say who is from the conservative side of the aisle, say the conservatives really don't want to win because they don't want to force him out, because their best chance at winning the next election is if it's Pierre Poilievre versus Justin Trudeau. Tyler, your last thought on this?
I think people are putting too much into it. I think that things are what they are, and the leaders that are the leaders today are going to be the leaders in the next election.
Well, that was kind of anticlimactic. Okay, so a tougher topic. Bill C-59. This has got the oil industry really in a bit of a flutter this week because they feel that they are targeted. So this is, and I think there's some agricultural pieces here. Okay, I think ag could be next. So it's this is from the Globe and Mail. A contentious provision within the government's bill C-59 makes changes to the Competition Act to combat greenwashing and puts companies at legal risk for making environmental or social assertions in public communications that do not stand up to the scrutiny. Individuals and companies could face sizable fines if found liable. I think I read somewhere where the fine is like up to $750,000, 3 times the benefit that they are claiming economically. Tyler, does ag need to be worried about C-59?
Yes, absolutely. So really what they're basically saying is you cannot make any environmental claim without strong evidence to back it up. And the reality is that there's a lot of ag, and again, it's not just companies, groups and organizations can be impacted by this too. A lot of ag groups, a lot of value chain organizations have a lot of big claims about sustainability on their websites that I would think would be challengeable. Again, it's one of these things where it's almost doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. What this does is create a setup where you can be challenged, and then you spend years fighting with the Competition Bureau over whether or not it's true or not. Oil and gas seem to have been the first target. I think that's why proactively companies and organizations are pulling claims down. I think agriculture might be very high on the list of what the activist community goes after next.
Yeah, there's oil companies and oil organizations that are scrubbing their social media, basically like taking it all down because of this. Yeah. Huge consequences here and just legal costs to just put up the fight and defend yourself, even if your assertions are correct. Kelvin, I think of, you think about activists going after beef and dairy as for examples, right? I think of biofuels as another example. There's a bridge between the oil sector and agriculture. This just seems to be opening a Pandora's box where no one's going to talk about anything that they're doing because they're worried about the legal costs.
Yeah, and I know, like, as somebody who works in journalism, I appreciate transparency and accuracy and all of that in terms of what types of claims are being made, and that greenwashing shouldn't be allowed, or those people should be held accountable. But a lot of this is based on very unclear and uncertain science and definitions that have yet to be determined, and so you're very quickly, immediately into gray area where courts are going to be interpreting science, and it's not going, like, there's going to be all kinds of disagreement on how emissions are measured and the science behind it. And so, yeah, I think that uncertainty, I wonder if we're shooting ourselves in the foot here in terms of having this ultra high standard to hold companies accountable for greenwashing claims, when what happens in the US or what happens in some of our other competing export countries that we trade with or that are in the same markets as Canada in terms of setting this bar so high here in Canada.
Yeah, Alberta Energy Minister Rebecca Schultz said it will hinder Canadians' ability to hear the truth about the energy industry and Alberta's success in reducing global emissions. Lyndsey, I don't think you're the first target here, but as somebody that is involved in, say, solar grazing, and you think about your own website and the things that you're saying you're doing, and I would think you got to be pretty careful with this kind of situation.
Yeah, and this is so a few things. One, where was this oversight on food labeling? I think we've had many arguments about what should be considered, claims that can be made. And yes, we do have rules about food labeling, but I think we've been critical many times about the claims that can be made on food labels, and that seemed to go just fine. The other part is awareness of something like this. So exactly that, at your mom and pop, backyard trying to sell their quote unquote sustainable food for their local market could potentially fall very much on the wrong side of this bill and be in really big trouble. Now, is that a good thing? I mean, to Kelvin's point, we should have, certification systems or ways to validate claims that are made. But at the same time, then we look at what are we trying to accomplish here? So, okay, so we're trying to stop greenwashing. Cool, fine. Is this the way to do it, though? Because realistically, one of the motivating factors for potentially taking on change or doing something that maybe costs a little more or whatever is trying to differentiate yourself as a company from somebody else. And so you take away any sort of marketing advantage to doing something different, and you've taken away the motivation then to do anything different. Now, is that all of the motivation? No. But if you're going to take on the cost and the time, the admin, all these things to quote unquote do the right thing, and then you can't talk about it?
Yep.
Like why? I
Again,
just think there's a way smarter way that we could be doing this. This is just stupid.
Tyler, final thought before we take a break.
Yeah, the problem is, at the end of the day, what it is one more reason why companies won't come to Canada to do business.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. We are more.
You guys are morphing to the same.
Okay, great point. I agree. It's not exactly a real spark of attracting competitiveness into the marketplace. Okay, we're going to take a break. We've got more of the RealAg Issues Panel, Lyndsey Smith, Kelvin Heppner, and Tyler McCann from CAPI right after this.
If you only listen to RealAg Radio, you only get half the picture. For greater insight into the issues that affect farming, tune in to RealAgriculture.com. Crops, livestock, machinery, farm management, and the markets, even food and travel. Real Agriculture Online digs deeper into the topics that affect the way you work and live. So get connected today. Read, watch, and listen to the people who know at RealAgriculture.com.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Shaun Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on SiriusXM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today.
You deal with many uncertainties on your farm. Managing risk should not be one of them. MMP's Ag team specializes in risk management. Visit mmp.ca to learn how you can stay ahead of the game and plan for the unknowns. One of the big unknowns is who's going to win this hockey game tonight as the Oilers start to, well, they've not even started. They are fully in progress of their battle back. We'll see what happens here over the weekend. I know a lot of the audience, I think it was like a third, 30% of you said prior to the playoffs you were cheering for Edmonton. Question your decisions, but that's what the numbers say, 30% of you. Okay, let's dig in here on, big announcement this week. Lyndsey, I saw it. I was there with my own eyes. I took the pictures for the feature image that went up on the story. Big announcement between GIFS, the Global Institute for Food Security, and Farm Credit Canada, University of Saskatchewan, $5 million from FCC going to GIFS, and it's all in the area of advanced breeding, speed breeding for crops and livestock.
That's right. And it means that the entire accelerated breeding program is now going to be called the FCC Accelerated Breeding Program. So they even get naming rights. And accelerated breeding, because what does that mean? It combines technologies such as genomics collection, speed breeding, as you mentioned, bioinformatics, and computer simulation to increase the rate of genetic gain for crop and livestock breeding programs. This is the cool part about this one that's going on over there at GIFS. And is it GIFS? Anyway,
people say GIFs. Yeah, no, they refer to it as GIFs.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
I gotta ask. Anyway, so the FCC Accelerated Breeding Program at GIFs will provide public and private breeders access to the same technologies not routinely available for crops and livestock important to Canada. So $5 million, and FCC gets to name the program, and away we go. I like to see that it's crops and livestock. Kind of fun to see the mashup.
And speed breeding, not to be, it is kind of like speed dating for genes.
Similar, yes, except for they don't really sit across the table and like move around. Anyway,
right.
But yeah, similar.
A little more precision than that.
Yeah, a little bit more.
I think this is a good thing. This is a big commitment by Farm Credit, first of all. They did a great job with the announcement. There's a lot of talk about, competitiveness and quick to market. And that's one of the issues in plant breeding, is the fact it does take long to get new products to market. So any just lopping off 1 year. I think they said like 3 years was one of the examples they used for plants. It's a big deal, Tyler. We need more of these kinds of investments being made in Canada.
Yeah, I think, Shaun, it clearly responds to a need. Yeah, I think it's right. This is a really good example of a strategic investment that we need to see more of. And I think, clearly responding to a need in the marketplace. I think it also speaks to FCC understanding kind of this really holistic view around sustainability. FCC has been a real leader on the sustainability file, but it's not just about, farmers adopting BMPs, but it's about giving farmers access to better varieties and kind of speeding up that innovation chain. And I really do think that R&D does continue to be one of this weak link in the chain in Canada that we don't talk enough about. I think people get all excited about, marketing and claims and kind of doing all sorts of stuff like that. R&D really often is where the weak link is, and that's where we should be seeing more investments in Canadian agriculture.
Okay, speaking of investments in Canadian agriculture, Kelvin, you got to fill in some details for me here. I was traveling, was on the road, Regina, Toronto, back here in Lethbridge. What is going on with Cereals Canada and the talk of a rather large investment in a building downtown in Winnipeg that's going to focus on Canadian product and almost like a supercharged Siggy? Or you describe what's going on here. Fill us in with the details.
Yeah, that is kind of what there's been discussion in Winnipeg and in the Western Canadian grain industry for going back several decades. I remember these conversations happening in the mid-2000s when the Canadian Wheat Board was still operating in downtown Winnipeg. Talk about building a complex, a facility, a grains center of excellence was the term that was used at that time to bring together the Canadian International Grains Institute, or CIGI, and the technical support that it provides to export customers around the world, the Canadian Malting Barley Technical Center as well on the malting barley side of things. The Grain Commission is also downtown, and right now they all share the same building and have for many years. And so we're expecting an announcement in the coming days from Cereals Canada. They are the organization that is driving this idea at this time. We're expecting an announcement sometime soon of a capital campaign, basically a fundraising and awareness raising campaign to build this new facility just east of Portage and Main in downtown Winnipeg, within blocks of where the Canadian Grain Commission building is. And according to a website that was published a few weeks ago, this new facility, the proposal would call this new facility the Global Agriculture Technology Exchange, or GATE. And it's expected that there are going to be some big requests for funding from the federal and Manitoba governments, as well as funding from Cereals Canada's members, which include the provincial wheat and barley grower associations from across Canada. Grain companies, crop input suppliers, millers are also part of Cereals Canada. Pulse Canada and the Canola Council also have their head offices nearby in downtown Winnipeg. And at this point, it doesn't sound like they are really drivers of this project, but they could potentially take up space in this facility as well. So there certainly has been a lot of discussion about this over the last week as rumors about it and what it could cost have been brought to the public eye. None of it is really official or been publicly announced at this point, but we are expecting that announcement here in the coming days, unless there's a change in direction at some point here.
Tyler?
Shaun, first on the name, in the political world, anything associated with the gate is usually a scandal and a bad thing. So I don't know if we think about this as Cereals Gate, if it's going to be kind of the new Watergate of whatever ag policy, ag associations are, but I'm not sure. Also, kind of from a farm perspective, usually gates are about keeping things out or keeping things in, and I'm not sure what that means in this context. But setting aside kind of the communications issues around the name, I think it's a real contrast to what FCC is doing in Saskatoon, right? Where FCC is looking at a really targeted announcement, working with gifts to respond to a specific need. I'm not clear kind of where that need is in the grain industry today. I think the grain value chain in Canada has evolved a lot over the last 10 years, especially since the end of the wheat board monopoly. And I don't see kind of the demand from the grain companies coming and supporting this. It's been interesting to watch over the last week as this has started to play out in the media that anybody that's been speaking about it actually has been raising concerns about it. The wheat growers have had a pretty strong column against it. The Canola Council said that they're not involved in it. So really hard to kind of see who is really involved in supporting it at this point in time. But ultimately, if the grain companies see value in it, they will come to the table and they will invest in it. I think that that's the big missing piece right now is seeing which companies are going to come and which companies are going to invest and which companies are going to put money in it, because it can't just be about farmers' money. I kind of hope it's not about the user fee surplus, and I don't think it should just be about government money either.
So looking at Twitter threads, which is dangerous on several levels. But a farmer from Alberta, Greg, replied to that column by the wheat growers and said, "Hey, let's do the math on this." And so this is Greg tweeting as at Redwood Acres. Let's do the math on this. On a cost share basis, producer share could be 35 million. 35 million. Let's spread that over 5 years, like your combine. That's 20 cents a ton per year. That's half a cent per bushel to market Canada's premium wheat crops at a premium prices. Lyndsey, is that a justification? Or Tyler wants to jump in.
Yeah, again, I guess like $35 million is a big number, and we need more investment in Canada today. But I think that, again, we haven't seen a lot of details of this, but it's hard for me to kind of make that leap between a new building in Winnipeg when there's lots of office space already vacant there, and marketing premium wheat to the rest of the country. And I think that we have this challenge where farmers, I think, have this idea still where the value chain of the markets work the way that they did under the wheat board days. And ultimately what we've got is grain companies that are around the world that are marketing Canadian wheat largely into commodity marketplaces. We've got buyers around the world that are increasingly sophisticated, that have a good understanding of how to use these products themselves. I'd be really curious as to how many of the, again, grain companies that are actually selling the grain and buyers that are actually using the grain have stepped up and said, we need this and it's going to make an advantage and it's going to help us buy Canadian grain or spend more money doing it.
What if we took that money, Lyndsey, and we put more people on the ground in the markets that we're actually trying to sell to and increase business with?
Or, maybe streamline the entire process of getting crops to market. I feel like this is potentially, I like the idea of a big idea, and we do talk about, maybe needing more of these, but I really do have to question the bricks and mortar focus of this. And I understand there's the whole purpose-built idea with what, the former Siggy, and I think we've all toured there. I mean, there's lots of equipment and, all these, they bake things there and they mill things and they, show their customers what to do with it, and they bring people in and tour them around and all these sorts of things. And I really have to wonder, okay, A, do you really need a brand new building to do that in, like from the ground up, when, I don't know, there's plenty of vacancies as far as commercial space goes, all over the place, really, in Canada, even beyond Winnipeg, but especially in Winnipeg. And is this really what the industry is, on the whole, is really asking for? Is this a huge gap that requires $100 million worth of investment? I have a hard time now, and we haven't seen the full sort of costing of this or the full plan because it hasn't formally been announced, but I really have to question the business model here of, like, if we're going to take $100 million into bricks and mortar, you're exactly right, Shaun. Like, I feel like those dollars are far better spent on many other things, including the people power and working at getting, product to market. And to Tyler's point, I think we've got plenty of wonderful companies and end use customers who already know what they're doing here. And perhaps having someone on the other end working with them is the money better spent than bringing a whole bunch of people to Winnipeg in January and showing them a fancy new machine.
Well, and I don't want to be hypocritical here. I want to see more of the details on what this leads to. What is the outcome that this strategy it produces, or the goal is it for to produce? I'm constantly on this show talking about how we don't think big, we're risk adverse, blah 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 blah. Some of you get tired of my narrative, and some of you cheerlead it. But I don't want to be hypocritical here. I think we do need to be. But Cereals Canada is going to have to really explain better than, hey, just trust us. This is what customers are saying. Well, this is the problem we got into with something like, say, responsible grain. Like, hey, customers want this. Well, who are the customers? There's like a void of that connection. So I'm not going to say no to this or, go on a tirade about it, but I just think we've really got to hear what the plan is, and producers are going to want to hear what the plan is, or otherwise we're going to get into all people are going to focus on $100 million. The other trouble here is we're moving into a little bit more of a cutback scenario. This is a little bit of a tougher thing for requests from the federal government for sure to invest in compared to, say, 2 years ago. We're in a different environment. So, Kelvin, you get the final thoughts here.
Oh, I agree completely. And I think politically, we're expecting a change in, or a lot of preparation is going into possibility of a change in federal government. And we've heard clear from the Conservative leader that corporations are not going to be the ones benefit. Big business isn't going to, they're aiming to cut back on that. And so is the federal government going to give $30-some million to an organization that has big companies on the board of it? And that's one thing, like you said. And to Tyler's point, I think there needs to be a discussion about in our grain industry about the role of this and what we need. The days of Siggy bringing in customers from developing countries that had century-old milling technology are over in many cases. People around the world have high-tech mills now, and to have even more high-tech mill in Winnipeg, maybe that's where the price tag is coming from this, but there needs to be a conversation about how that marketing and the ROI on those dollars has maybe changed over the last couple decades.
Yeah. Okay, we got to take a break. We've got more coming up here on the RealAg Issues Panel. Lyndsey Smith, Kelvin Heppner, and Tyler McCann of CAPI. We'll be right back right after this.
How's your seed quality? What should you treat with? What about herbicide carryover and environmental concerns? Spring is here, and you've got a lot of things to think about in regards to your pulse crop. The Pulse School on Real Agriculture has information and advice for all these questions and more to help you navigate this season. Brought to you by BASF. Pulse School episodes are available at pulseschool.com, realagriculture.com, or as a podcast on your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
I'm Lyndsey Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lyndsey Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
As we head into the weekend, we should talk about a really light topic like Canada's military spending. But Lyndsey, before we get to that, you wrote a fantastic column based off of what we talked about here last week on the show. And it was kind of like this word that sort of describes the attitude about a number of different topics in Canada right now. Meh. Meh. You wrote the column asking some of these questions. What's been the feedback?
So, and thank you to everybody who read it, who shared it, and did send their feedback, because we did get quite a bit, and I appreciate it. A lot of it was in line with, people who agreed that they're frustrated as well, that we just can't seem to muster up enough energy to say, hey, this needs to change. There was a comment about, if we don't pay attention, this is what we end up with. We end up with policies that don't really move anything forward. We end up with a whole bunch of decisions made for us that we maybe don't agree with, and it becomes too late to really make the change that we want to see. And so, I got a lot of encouragement of, it's a good reminder that this is why we need to be involved in, say, your producer groups or in your local community and with your municipal governments and all these sorts of things, that it's a good impetus to get involved, because ultimately, if you don't say anything, nobody knows what you think. So Thank you to everyone who did send some feedback. But we have, of course, as I think we're going to talk about, other examples of where this permeates really the entire Canadian existence right now.
Yeah. Well, another meh topic is Canadian military spending. This is one that I've talked about before. And when it was brought up in terms of Canada spending 2% of its GDP on military as a part of the NATO agreement, as a member of NATO, it was brought up by former President Trump. And of course, everybody, because it's Trump, has the same sort of reaction. Well, time has moved on, and it's not just Trump saying it. It's other countries in Europe as well. Pierre Beatty, the head of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, right? I heard an interview with him yesterday, basically saying that, essentially saying Canada's a freeloader, full stop. Kelvin, why is this now? Why we're talking about this is because Beatty makes the connection to we are impacting negatively our major trading partner. And this is going to become a major trade issue if there is a renegotiation on the USMCA CUSMA agreement. Kelvin, do you think that's a possibility? Do you see it that way?
Oh, I think it's already setting up. We are already seeing it being an issue with the renegotiation of NAFTA and the Canada-U.S. relationship as a whole, Canada's most important relationship when it comes to our economy and the future of our country. And so that's where, we're already seeing Congress people and ambassadors, and it's not just President Trump talking about this. And we had the head of NATO in Canada this week as well, sharing that message, the importance of Canada getting up to 2%. And when it comes to the renegotiation of CUSMA or USMCA, there's been some talk about the 3 Ds being the controversial issues on the Canada-US file, those being digital stuff around digital taxes, I believe is one of them. And then dairy, which we are very familiar with here. And then, of course, defense spending. And so we're expecting, like you said, this to heat up, especially and on the trade front. And so that's potentially, this is something that will factor into trade negotiations in the coming years.
Currently, we're spending about 1.3% of our GDP on defense.
There is a way of raising that number, though, raising that ratio.
Tank the GDP.
You lower the bottom number. You lower the bottom
Kelvin,
number.
no.
Oh my gosh. Maybe that's what we're striving for. Tyler, why? I hope that this is an election issue because it should be, but I don't have confidence it will be. What are your thoughts on this ask from NATO this week in Ottawa?
I think we as Canadians like to take the easy way out, right? So rather than becoming a valuable partner to the United States by investing in defense, we send a Team Canada mission and we pat ourselves on the back because we're sending politicians to speak to other politicians. We like to do the easy thing rather than doing the hard work. To be honest, I think there's a bit of the case with the Cereals Canada building where we're going to pat ourselves on our back. We're going to build a building rather than actually doing the serious hard work. And I think that we need to have a better understanding of how we're continuously falling short on a lot of issues that matter to a lot of different people. Yeah, it is about choices. Meeting that 2% defense target means that we'll have to spend less money on other things. Maybe that means that we spend less money on agriculture, but that has a huge payoff in the long run if it helps ensure that Canada's at the table, that Canada's views are reflected, that our export markets are kept open. And we need to understand that, again, this is one of those real strategic investments that's essential for the future of the country.
We have families that have entered the military to stand up and defend our interests, put their lives on the line, and we can't even have a discussion about how we get that number to 2%. I think it is a total discredit and a real slap in the face to people that have stood up, have entered that line of work. And I think it's really just awful. And I wish it would, it's something that I think that needs to change in terms of our attitude, move from meh to really taking these things a lot more seriously. Hey, panel, thank you so much for joining us here today. Have yourselves a great weekend. We are very close to out of time. I really do appreciate it. Tyler McCann, he's managing director at the Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute, CAPI, as well as Kelvin Heppner and Lyndsey Smith of RealAgriculture. If you have any feedback, send us an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Thanks everybody for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio.